The GameCube was once again on the rise in 2005. It had received a price cut, making it the cheapest home console on the market. It had a growing library with third-party support returning to it. Nintendo's top brass were showing that they were willing to make the changes necessary to make their company work in the modern landscape. All was well until a new threat emerged. It wouldn't be a new competitor. It would completely change the way we looked at games, and would send the GameCube to its grave. It was a revolution. This is the story of the Nintendo GameCube, and in this episode, we'll discuss the discontinuation of the system, the death of it, as well as the rise of its successor, the Nintendo Wii. Nintendo's biggest success with third parties mostly came from the association with Japanese developers and publishers. Nintendo had a strong history with these companies since the 80s, and would utilize their talents to create new titles. This is how developers from Sega were able to create F-Zero GX, and the people at Namco were able to develop Star Fox Assault. The biggest developer backing Nintendo at the time was Capcom. Capcom had worked on Nintendo projects before, by developing some handheld titles for the Game Boy systems and their group of GameCube titles known as the Capcom 5. By the end of 2003, one of these games had been cancelled, and two others had already been released. It wouldn't be until 2005 that the final two games would finally come out. Killer 7 was released on July 7th, 2005, or 7/7. It was a moderate success, and helped put its developer, Grasshopper Manufacturer, on the map. It didn't hold a candle to the biggest title of the Capcom 5, and arguably the biggest game to ever grace the Nintendo GameCube. In January of 2005, after being delayed for years and reworked in a whole host of ways, Resident Evil 4 launched exclusively on the GameCube. The title had first been hinted at in late 1999, and had gone through many different revisions. One of the most notable was reworked into its own game, and eventually became the franchise Devil May Cry. But it all paid off. Resident Evil 4 became an instant success. It was considered one of the best games of 2005, and frequently ranks among the highest rated Nintendo GameCube titles. It would help popularize the over-the-shoulder camera angle used in third-person shooters, and set a new standard for action games. The title would sell 1.6 million copies on the GameCube, but it just wasn't enough. Despite Capcom's claims that Resident Evil 4 would remain an exclusive for the GameCube, they quickly began working on a port for the title for the PlayStation 2. It only made sense for Capcom to capitalize on it given the series' history on the PlayStation, as well as the massive install base the PlayStation 2 had. Nintendo wasn't happy, and is rumored to have resented Capcom over this decision. Nevertheless, Resident Evil 4 would launch on the PlayStation 2 in October of 2005, giving the GameCube its biggest third-party exclusive for a total of 10 months. The title would continue to receive ports to basically every console released after 2005, with the only current exception being the recently released Nintendo Switch. With a few minor exceptions, Resident Evil 4 has always received high praise regardless of the system that it's been on, and many still consider that Resident Evil 4 is one of the greatest games ever made, myself included. At E3 2004, Nintendo had returned to form. For their next conference, they would have to make sure the world was watching. Microsoft was preparing to launch their next system, and Sony had already begun hyping up their new system, the PlayStation 3. Nintendo would shock the world with their own announcement. At E3 2005, Nintendo would reveal their next console under the codename Revolution. The new system would feature motion controls, something Nintendo had experimented with during the GameCube's development. The most surprising feature, or rather the lack of, the new system wouldn't sport HD graphics, making the Nintendo the outlier in the race for the most powerful game console. The Revolution would eventually become the Nintendo Wii. Since the Wii was a successor to the GameCube's days were numbered. It wasn't all bad news for the GameCube, however. The Wii would be fully backwards compatible with the GameCube, and would still utilize the system's controllers and memory cards. Many Wii games would use the GameCube controller too. Nintendo basically built the GameCube into every Wii for the first couple of years of production. The GameCube wasn't done yet, as it would still see a plethora of high-profile titles throughout 2005. Fire Emblem would return to home consoles with Path of Radiance. Intelligent Systems also took their Advanced Wars series and brought it to home consoles in the form of Battalion Wars. Mario wouldn't miss out on the fun either, as many Mario spin-offs would come to the GameCube. Donkey Kong even made a minor comeback with Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, a 2.5D platformer that used the DK bongos as a controller. Nintendo would continue to reach out to third parties to help with their properties as well. Star Fox Assault was developed by Namco, and Konami helped create one of the strangest spin-offs in the Mario universe, Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix. Nintendo would even publish their second M-rated title in August of 2005 with Geist, a first-person adventure title with shooter elements. Third parties would begin to return to the GameCube in 2005. Eidos, one of the biggest defectors, would publish LEGO Star Wars on the GameCube in late 2005, and future multi-platform titles would come to the GameCube, albeit usually later than their counterparts on PlayStation 2 or Xbox. Eidos would even release Tomb Raider Legend on the GameCube in late 2006, a massive change as the series had previously been a PlayStation icon. 2005 would prove to be a good year for the Nintendo GameCube. One major title would miss 2005 though. The GameCube's second Legend of Zelda title, Twilight Princess, would be pushed back into 2006. 2006 would be an otherwise unimpressive year for the GameCube. With the Wii's release coming, the GameCube would see very few new titles. Chibi Robo would come out in February, bringing a new IP under Nintendo's wings. Nintendo would release the experimental Odama in April. The title was part pinball game and part real-time strategy. Using the GameCube's microphone, you commanded troops while trying to move a massive ball across the map with the controller. It was strange to say the least. Baten Kaitos Origins would come out in 2006 as well. It was a prequel to the original GameCube exclusive that launched in 2003. The title would be published by Nintendo. Less than a year later, Nintendo would purchase a majority stake in the shares of Monolith Soft, the game's developer, making them a first-party Nintendo studio. E3 2006 was primarily about the new Nintendo Wii, but the GameCube wasn't forgotten. Nintendo would reveal Super Paper Mario, the third title in the Paper Mario series. It was originally a Nintendo GameCube game, planned for release in October of 2006, but the title would eventually be moved to the Wii and released in 2007. Another game announced at E3 2006 was Donkey Kong Bongo Blast, a racing game that utilized the DK bongos. It too would be moved over to the Wii in 2007, being renamed Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, and would use the Wii's motion controls as opposed to any additional accessories. Another title shown off for the Nintendo GameCube during its lifetime was a 3D Kirby title that never officially received a name. The title was shown off multiple times through the years, sporting different looks, but would never release on the GameCube. The game was never officially cancelled, but was retooled and released as Kirby's Return to Dreamland on the Wii in 2011, making it one of the last major holdouts from the GameCube era. With many major GameCube titles being pushed to the Wii, fans still held out hope that The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess would be released on the Nintendo GameCube. It would, but with a catch. At E3 2006, Nintendo would reveal that Twilight Princess would be a launch title for the Wii, and that the game would release on the GameCube at the same time. Twilight Princess would eventually come out in November of 2006 on the Wii, but the GameCube version missed the date. It would come out a month later, and would be the final first-party title released on the GameCube. The wait was worth it, as Twilight Princess received critical praise and became the best-selling title in the Legend of Zelda series. Like its predecessor, The Wind Waker, Twilight Princess would receive an HD remake on the Wii U, and was released in early 2016.
It's another late night for gamers as they wait to try out the latest game system. The Nintendo Wii goes on sale at midnight, just days after the PlayStation 3 hit store shelves.
On November 19, 2006, the Nintendo Wii would launch in North America for $249.99. Its release came 5 years and 1 day after the Nintendo GameCube landed on American shores. The Wii would go on to become a massive success. It made history as Nintendo's best-selling home console, and it would be the best-selling game system of the 7th generation, replicating the success Nintendo found in the 80s and 90s. It came with a pack-in title, Wii Sports, which would go on to sell over 82 million copies, becoming the 4th best-selling game of all time. For the GameCube, it was over. Nintendo's Lunchbox was quietly discontinued in early 2007, as releases for the system became fewer and far between. Nintendo would sell just shy of 22 million Nintendo GameCubes during its run. It would be the worst-selling Nintendo home console until the Wii U failed to reach an audience in the mid-2010s. Nintendo also failed to outsell Sony's PlayStation 2, which would sell over 150 million units before it was discontinued in 2013. Nintendo's goal of 50 million units became a far cry of reality. Nintendo even failed to outsell Microsoft, who had just barely outsold the Gamecube with 24 million Xboxes. Few titles would release on the Gamecube after the Wii launched. Only licensed titles and sports games would grace the system. The final Nintendo Gamecube game was released on August 14, 2007. It was Madden 08, an otherwise unremarkable title. The Gamecube would live on through the Wii, as the system was backwards compatible with most Nintendo Gamecube games and accessories, but with support officially ended, the Gamecube was finally dead. This is part 5 of a multi-part series covering the story of the Nintendo Gamecube. You can support this series by sharing this video on your favorite social media sites and checking out previous videos if you haven't already done so. Be sure to subscribe to catch the final video in this series. In it, we'll look at the legacy of the Nintendo Gamecube, what it meant for Nintendo, and how the system itself was a success.